OK, děkujem. Volám se Filip, můj slovenský je velmi zlý, so this will be in English. This talk will be about Cubiverse, and I will present you the game and some stuff around it and what we learned from it. So, the topic, as you might have seen on the program, is the Cubiverse recipe and how we combined the Rubik's Cube and the fresh idea to get unique gameplay out of it. And my name is Filip Kapusta, and despite the name, I'm not from Slovakia, also not from Poland, even though the name comes from Poland, but I'm from Germany. So currently, though, I live in Slovakia and work in Slovakia with a bunch of these guys over there. And also what I love a lot is kapustnica, because there's also kapusta in it. So it's really good stuff. And all these combined is like really cool combo for me right now, because I love working there right now and it's a lot of fun. A little bit about me. I'm a sound designer, composer, and audio engineer, which basically means I create sound effects and also music. And then I also take care of implementation into the engine and mixing that stuff so that nothing is too loud or too quiet. On my previous projects back in Germany, I had some kind of studio. So this is kind of my setup. And there I worked on projects like Enderal, the Shards of Order. I knew these guys from university, they were in the same study group, and one day I asked them if they need sound effects, and they said yes, and that's how we got to work with each other. Also smaller projects like Cubiverse, which I will be presenting today. And then I came to Košice 2 years ago. There first I worked for a company called Matsuko, and now I work for Games Farm. And this is my room at Games Farm, and like where and how I do stuff there. There with our boss, I worked on a game that was named Helmut, the Badass from Hell. I created music for this. And quite recently we released Shadows Awakening, for which I did sound design, which is an action RPG. So I was told that the audience today might be quite mixed, so that not just game devs might be here, but also like people who just like to play games, or just people who are interested in anime or manga or comics or whatever. So I try to make this talk quite general, to have something for everyone. Oh, you have actually a Rubik's Cube with you. That is pretty cool. And yes, I will get to this in a second. So this talk is supposed to be quite an overview and also what we learned from it, so that if you are at any point working on your own game projects, maybe you find one or two things helpful. So this is about the schedule, about the game, the idea that we had, and how we turned this idea into realization. Secondly, the issues and problems we had, which came up during development, which hopefully you will get one or two things out of it which might help you. And last of all, since I'm the sound and music guy, I want to talk a little bit about music and the collaboration I did with our lead artist for Cubiverse, and how we created the cutscene to explain some of the gameplay elements. So what is Cubiverse? Cubiverse is a 3D puzzler for mobile games. And we try to especially focus on the touch and swipe aspect. So what we want is that it feels really good when swiping these segments, and really natural. The game engine is Unity. It's not the first engine we used for this game, though. Back in university, we started off with Havoc Vision Engine, because back then we wanted to take part in a contest, which they had back then, a student contest. But in the end, this did not turn out like we did not win, and also with the engine we had some problems because we were not really savvy of those things. So we switched to Unity, which is more general, more basic, and easier to understand, I would say. And also it's a single player, because I added this because I was sometimes asked if people can make races against each other, who's faster solving the cube. But it's single player for now, and it's not released yet. We have been working on this for quite a while. It's been almost, I think, 5 years now. More about this later. Yeah, we want to release it at the beginning of next year. And by the way, Cubiverse comes from Cube and Universe, so very smart. Okay, now I want to show you the trailer that you can get an impression of how does it look like. I will turn this mic off for a second, or lay down. And don't worry if you don't understand everything, I will explain later. Okay, so much for the trailer. Let's continue with the presentation. Do you work? Yes, you work. Okay, so who initially started it? And it was back in 1974, I can tell you. Does anyone know who this guy might be? Have you ever seen this guy or read about him? No one? Okay, so this is Erno Rubik. And he's the inventor of the Rubik's Cube. And without the Rubik's Cube, there would be no Cubiverse today. So, and the idea of him was he was a teacher, he was a professor, and in order to teach his students something about three-dimensional aspects, that's how he invented the Rubik's Cube. So we took this Rubik's Cube and tried to give it some twist to make it kind of different gameplay of it. About the history, the idea was born back then in university in 2013, if I'm correct. Back then we created a prototype, which we handed in, and then we got some marks for it, and then we carried on with other projects and also with university stuff. So the project was laid aside for a moment, or for a couple of years actually. And 2 years later, we were still convinced a lot about this concept, because we thought it's something that we have not seen, I think, at all so far. So we wanted to continue it and make an actual good game out of it. And then we started to touch it again and rebuild it in Unity. And back then it was a hobby project for us, because some of us had full-time jobs at other companies. It's the same right now. So the only time we have time to work on it is on the weekends or after work. So if you have this cube, like, what is your idea? How do you get to another kind of game out of this? And one of us had the idea, okay, what if you put some little guy on it and some rocket or some assets, so maybe a tree or a stone, and make it like a planet or something. And that was the initial spark, which ended up in this kind of game. But back to this, so how do you approach this when you're a student and don't have a lot of knowledge about stuff like this, about game development, about engines? So the cool idea we had was to, since we didn't know about engines so much, we needed a quick way to do level design. So we glued some Lego on a Rubik's Cube. So down there is the Rubik's Cube. And this was a nice way for us to test it in a quick way without having any technical issues in engines or so on. And quite soon we realized that this can get quite complex, because there's so many possibilities of how to do the turns. Like the first turns you can kind of calculate, but then it's exponentially increasing So we started to have all these tables, and it got quite big and bigger than we expected. And then we had another idea, like, it would be cool if we would do seasonal cubes, for example, an ice cube, ice setting, or maybe what about the lava cube? And then we created a bunch of concepts, and we're thinking about that stuff. And then we had another cool idea, like what if we do 4x4x4 cubes? That would be much more difficult and so many more possibilities. And then we thought we were really smart and had more ideas. So what if we put animals on top of this cube and items which you could collect? So this is honey, and this would be a bear. This is still in the old engine. And you would have to collect the honey and bring it to the bear and create quests and everything. And we had even more ideas. What if there is stones or trees on top of it, and if each of those circles represents a stone, you would have to form shapes like a circle or an axe. And more ideas, like what if this is all by 4x4x4 or 5x5x5, or even if we do cubes that are not really cubes, but go in different dimensions. And the biggest idea was like, wow, we could do virtual reality. It would be so nice if you could really twist those segments. And eventually we realized it's much too much. We cannot at all handle this. So all of these ideas were pretty cool, but nothing of it would ever see the daylight, or not in a good state that would make fun, because it would take just too much time. So we went back to the roots. Like, what do we have? And that would be the cube. And then what would be the gameplay? And that's the cool stuff right now. No matter how difficult the cube will be and how many mechanics we introduce to make it more difficult, it will always be solvable by either turning segments or by walking with this little guy. And this, by the way, we call him Cubinaut, which is a mix of Cubiverse and astronaut. We are so smart. Now I want to show you how this looks like in the game. And I have a build with me, and I hope the music is still running. Oh yeah. So this is our menu when you start the game. And from there we can choose, for example, to start the game, which would be a cool thing. And then you end up on the level map, and these are some clusters. So from 1 to 9, right here, this would be one cluster, and there would be one mechanics in there. And then in the next level cluster, there would be a new mechanics introduced that will make it more tricky. And I will show you what I mean about this. So let's start off in the very first level. And we decided to have no text at all in the gameplay. So we want the player to be able to learn it just by looking at it. So we wanted to make it as obvious as possible what the player has to do in the game. So the first 3 levels are some kind of tutorial where you learn how to cope with this cube. And it tells me to do something twice, and on touch this would be like tapping. So let's try this. Okay, once, and I can like select a path where I want to go. So let's go there. Okay, I collect this thing, and now I have to do this twice here, which means basically walking back, and it's it. So let's continue. And what we learn right now is that we can do different stuff. So this time the crystal we have to collect, more about this later in the story, why you have to collect this crystal and bring it to the rocket. So it's on the other side, and we cannot walk there. It's not possible. So what we can do is swipe this segment, and now we can reach it. And we do the same thing than we did last round, and just bring it back to the rocket. And let me switch now to a level which is further back. Oh, I see. It's not unlocked, so we will do a quick cheat, which of course only developers will have. Unlock all levels. Alrighty. So let's take, for example, this one. And in this one you will see there is a bunch of things now on this cube. And what they will do is just be an obstacle, which makes it a little bit harder to walk, because sometimes the path can be blocked, the path to the crystal can be locked, and you have to find a combination of how to get there. You see, if I just turn this segment now, the crystal is down here. It would not be reachable because it's blocked by this thing, and I cannot walk there. So what I can do is maybe swipe this one around and see if there's a free field, and there is. And usually the correct way, or the optimal way to do this, is to look around the cube and see what is where and what be my next optimal turn to get closer to the crystal. So we collect this now, and again bring it back to the rocket, and that's it for this level. And now I want to show you the first mechanics that we introduced, which makes it more tricky. And what you will see is that there is something on the cube. It's a tree trunk, and this tree trunk is not just on one field, but it's connected to two fields, which will mean whenever you want to turn one field, like one segment, the other one will automatically turn with it because it's connected. And we haven't optimized loading times yet. That will be much faster. So actually we have two of those right now. And you see, if I want to turn this one, for example, that both these segments will move because of this trunk. But let's keep this quick and do it like this. And again, collect the crystal and bring it back. Okay, one more, and then I will leave the rest to you. Let's see, what can we take? Let's take one of those. This will take a bit more of loading now, because we have these clusters in one loading time. So if you switch to another cluster where new mechanics get introduced, it needs to load this cluster again. And then within this cluster it would be much faster to load. And there you will see that this crystal, you can see it on the blue shimmer that is shining to the stars, is here, like on this field. And there is something that will hinder us from getting it, because if we go there and touch it, we will burn our hands, since this is a burning tree or burning bush. So what we can do, we see fire and water. So maybe if we combine those two and bring the fire to the water, then you see, okay, we got rid of the fire, we can go collect the crystal. And obviously also these mechanics can be combined, so there could also be a tree trunk or even two on the backside that could make it more tricky, and then if you want to turn it, you will see, oh, both of those are turning. So okay, that's it for the gameplay demo. I will switch back to the presentation. I hope you got an impression on how it looks like, this game to play. Yeah, what we really think is the unique thing about this is that it takes the Rubik's Cube and adds something on top of it. Yeah. Since I think many people, if not all people, know the Rubik's Cube, it's easy to understand that you can turn those things. And it's also easy to learn, since the only two things you have to do is either walk or turn, no matter how difficult it will be. So it's easy to learn and hard to master. Let me give you an overview of who's working on this. We are 9 people right now, and you see from the top left. Oh, I'm still not, yeah, I got it, okay. From the top left to the right, we have our lead artist. And yeah, she obviously does also art stuff and manages between the artists below what they are going to do. We have the programmer who's doing all the programming stuff, level designer, project manager. We have me, a sound guy. We have a game designer, and she also is very savvy with iOS, which helps us a lot. We have a technical artist, he's doing all the visual effects, a 3D artist, and another 3D artist and animator, which is kind of a big team for this kind of game, obviously. But since we started out in university, you know, we kept it like this. And we don't really have an office right now, since I am in Slovakia. The lead artist and team manager, they are in Sweden right now, up here. And the other Cubinauts are down here in Munich, where we also studied and started the project. So it can be quite tricky to keep a shared vision. For example, if the game designer is introducing a new mechanics, like this tree trunk, then the coder has to know how is it working, does it function with the other mechanics, will there be some difficulties? The artists will have to know, okay, how big is this going to be, how should we, like, what is the color, and how does it fit to the color setting? And I need to know, okay, does this trunk make any sound? I don't know, if you move the segment or so, or does this other mechanic make any sound? So we have to keep a close line of communication, which sometimes can be quite tricky in this kind of setup. What we're trying to do, have at least weekly calls, and then in between we are reachable. I think we are Slack and also Discord we use. So it's actually better if you are on one spot or in one studio to work on it. But if it's not possible in any other way, then this could be a good solution to have sync meetings and everything. So we are making this game. Basically, we initially we wanted to make it for a younger audience because we thought, okay, we have this kind of cute setting. As you can see, also the colors are quite colorish. But we soon saw that a lot of people like this game, and we showed it on a bunch of conferences. And the cool thing is that we get a lot of feedback there. So this helped us a lot to improve the game, and also presenting it like here in Comic Saloon is a good way for us to see how people like it. And also at the Gamescom, I think it was, we got the art director of Hearthstone to play it, and he got us some really valuable feedback that was pretty cool. This is us at Gamescom 16, I believe, where we had some booth and also got really good feedback. And then something happened which we did not really expect to happen. We always were thinking about this, but then it still happened. So in addition to showing this game on conferences, we also handed it in for contests. And yeah, actually after I think 2 years, we won something, and that was pretty cool for us. And also pretty new experience, because as soon as there was some prize money, and as soon as there is money involved, it will get much more serious. It will morph from a student project into everything is a business decision, basically. So we also, since this prize was sponsored by Ubisoft, we had the chance to go there to Ubisoft Blue Byte in Düsseldorf, I believe, in Germany, where they got us again some really valuable feedback. And yeah, so financials were involved. And that was something that we had no experience with at all. So first of all this documentation you have to do, like writing down, if you, for example, go to a conference and the train ride costs you, I don't know, 20 or 50 bucks, then taking documentation with you, like the invoice, and then maybe getting it back from the company. Also the law, oh yeah, the law, not my favorite topic, but you know, it's one thing about reading a contract, and another thing, a completely another thing, to understand a contract. So that is something we had to learn, and also finding a good and reliable lawyer, which took us some time. So we realized this is morphing into something serious. And what helped us with this is that we had some work sessions. So you saw that many of us were spread around Europe, but sometimes we would go to Germany, like before Christmas or so, and there it would be really cool if we got together for maybe a weekend and work on this, because also it keeps motivation up. Since as soon as there's all this serious stuff involved, like financials and, you know, when all these decisions that you made in university, like, hey, let's do this or let's do this, suddenly become really important and might change the game or the success of the game in the future. So when all this stuff, this adult stuff is involved, it can hinder motivation sometimes. So this helped us a lot to have these work sessions. Also, we recognized that just good enough stuff is not just good enough anymore, but it will be on the stores, it will be as good as the competitors, or maybe even worse. So we really wanted to get this to a polished level, so we polished and reworked a lot of stuff. For example, for this balloon mechanics, oh, I didn't even show this because I showed the rain. So what you would have to do is that there's this balloon, and on top there would be the crystal hidden. So you have to get this balloon down somehow. And then somewhere on the map there will be a laser, which will basically shoot it down if you align it vertically. And this was before, it was not a laser, but I think a harpoon. And it looked entirely different. So people were not getting if this is a usual gameplay element, like a blocker, like a tree, or if it is something important that is connected to the mechanics, to the gameplay that they have actually to use to get somewhere. So yeah, this is something we had to keep in mind. Also, we reworked visual stuff like the menu. The left side is the old menu and right side is new menu, which I think looks more modern right now and more to the like what people would like at this point in time. Okay, and then we had this problem like, okay, you have to collect this crystal and get it to the rocket, but why? What is this crystal, and why is there a rocket, and why do you do this? Okay, and the way we wanted to solve this is by introducing an intro and outro video. I will only show the intro today, in which we would explain why you have to collect this crystal and bring it back. And at the same time now, I want to show how I collaborated with our lead artists in order to create this intro video, which would have obviously visuals and also sound aligned to it. And I will show you a video now. And this will be in 3 iterations. So first of all, I will show you the video without audio and explain how we explain the assets on the cube and the gameplay. So if I go back to the beginning here, you see there's this rocket flying through space. This is a work in progress, so keep this in mind. It's flying through space, and in this is our little cubinaut, and on the bottom you see something blue, and this is a big crystal which is which we explain to be used as a fuel crystal for this rocket. So without this, no fuel, so no flying spaceship. So it's basically required. And now if we go further, we see that something happens in this story. So we have our little guy on the bridge, and he's like, oh, fine, I'm happy, I have my crystal, I have my ship. And then the alarm is going to ring, and something will happen. There is a meteor storm coming in. And unfortunately, he's not lucky today, so this rock will crash into the big crystal and split it apart. And these are the small splits of crystals that you have to collect in the planets, in the universe. Yeah, and he's like, oh damn, it's flying away. So, what can I do to get those back? And this is when there's this change in this cutscene. Okay, he reminds himself, there is something in the back of my ship, a smaller ship, a rocket, which I can use to fly to these small planets and get all these crystals back in order to get my mothership up and running again. And then that's his quest, and this is how we explain the game. So he goes into the menu, or this fades into the menu, and this is how you would start the game. And this is also how I get this stuff from the artists, for example. So I had these rough concepts of the intro scene, and what I do now is usually go over it with the piano and do my rough sketches there. Let me just line the volume. There's the danger coming in. And then we have this kind of nostalgic, sad scene where this crystal is flying by. And then he's taking faith again because he has this idea. And this is fading into this main menu theme. And you would go back to the actual gameplay. And what I do from there is I take my piano stuff, and the higher tones I try to align to some higher instruments like strings or woodwinds, and lower tones, for example, to brass, something massive, and also add some percussion on top of it. And this is how I use my piano sketches to get some orchestral stuff out of it. There's also sound effects. Oh, he's taking faith again. And this is like the main tune of the game, which will reoccur in a lot of soundtracks later on. Yeah, so this is how we work together to do this basically in iterations. So whenever we have some new sketches, we send it over, and then she will update the stuff and send it over to me, and again so on. Back to the presentation. Let me see if I finish this. Yes. Okay. Now, I also want to jump just a little bit into the music stuff in general now, and there is quite a difference in between game and film music. So I'm not sure if you ever recognized, but if you're watching a movie and then watch it again on the same spots, on the same frame, every time there will be the same music cue, obviously, and the same tone or whatever. But if you have games, for example, it can be quite different. Maybe you visited the talk yesterday of Grant Beats, who talked about dynamic audio. But so, yeah, you have this non-linearity basically. If you play games, you can walk left or walk right, or you can just stand there for 10 minutes. And always the music should be able to react and to do something similar than the player is doing. But I won't talk about this today. I want to talk about the length of the music. Since movies usually are around 1 hour until 30 minutes or maybe 2 hours, but games can be up to, I don't know, 100 hours or 200 hours playtime if it's some World of Warcraft stuff or so. So how do composers for games do this actually? How do they create music for this? Is there just a bigger budget? Usually no. So how do they do this? And there's some really cool technique how to take a given composition that you do and stretch it. And I want to show you how this can be done. So this is called layering. And what you do there is, for example, if you have a composition, and this composition consists of brass and string instruments and maybe some percussion, and instead of taking this whole composition as one file, which you have composed, maybe you split it up. So you take the brass out of it, the strings or the percussion, and export it as separate files. So instead of one big file for the soundtrack, you have now 3, which means I can do variations and layer this stuff. So on top of each other. So what if I take, for example, just the percussion layer and do this for some action stuff, and then if there's some intense scene coming in, I maybe add the brass on top of it and play just those 2 layers without the strings. And they will always be perfectly in synchronization because I have composed it as a single piece before. So this is a pretty cool technique to do this, and it gives me possibilities to stretch the soundtrack. Even though, of course, the big composition sounds bigger because there's more instruments in it. So you have to calculate that if you take just some part of it, then it will sound thinner or a bit smaller. But you might get more variations out of it. And now imagine if you take this concept and do not just take one layer for the brass, but if you do variations of the brass, like brass 1, brass 2, brass 3, and you could switch between those also. And then you do the same thing for the strings and for the percussion. And this is really cool because now you can do a lot of combinations that will always be perfectly in line with each other. For example, I can take brass 1 and strings 2 and percussion 1, or brass 3 and strings 1, and then maybe no percussion. So I get a lot of variations out of this. And this is how game composers usually or sometimes take this technique to extend their soundtrack and to make it longer. Okay, last but not least, the goals, like where do we want to go with this project? We have, I think right now, about 35 levels or so that can be played and that will introduce new mechanics. We want to have, by the beginning of next year, 50 levels that are polished, which means they should look nice, they should sound nice, and they should work together nice, and there should be an increasing curve in difficulty. Also, we want to have 5 different gameplay mechanics at least, like something like the rain and the fire, or this tree that would block those 2 fields together, like this balloon that I showed you, and a bunch of others. We want to have this intro and outro scene to be able to explain why you are doing this in the game. And of course, we want to reach some people, because if you're sitting in your studios and creating something that you are convinced of, but no one will know about it, then you will get nothing out of it. So we want to reach some people and be able to also monetize the game. And if there is something I want to give you for on the way, that will probably be like, for example, for us composers, sometimes it can be difficult to get inspiration if you're standing in front of a blank sheet. How do you start? What is your first tone? Sometimes the inspiration can be just in your surroundings, like this member of ours did with the cube. Like she took this Rubik's cube and like, what if I add an world on top of it or something like this? So that's that, and concentrate on the really important core mechanics of your game. So if this is not working, even though your game looks nice, then probably your game will not be very successful, or people will not play it for a long amount of time. Because if the core gameplay, the stuff that you do all the time, if it's not working, or if it does not feel natural, like for us the swiping and touching of iPads, if this is not polished, this is not a good thing. So concentrate on this and do the important stuff first. Like we had all these ideas, but probably we'll never finish all of them. So do what you can handle in time. Yeah. Communication. I cannot emphasize this one enough. It's probably the most important of all. So if you don't have good communication and a close communication line, then probably what you will end up with is that one person will do one thing, like how they will imagine the game, and another person will do the other thing. and it might be cool for them. But if you take this together as a whole piece, as a game, that might be something that is in contrast to each other or just not working together. And also, yeah, as I said already before, spread the news, tell people that you're doing something that you're convinced of that might be cool. Otherwise, no one will know about it. And with that being said, I want to thank you all for being here today and for listening to this. You can reach out with us, to us. We have a bunch of social networks here. We are happy about any questions or comments you have. Feel free to do that. And also, if you want, you can ask questions now. So thank you very much.
So do you have any questions for Philip?
Oh, hi.
Hi.
I'd like to ask, how long have you been working on it, and how far are you from release? I saw on your webpage that it's like there's a button for Google Play, but it's not working yet. So.
Oh, you have been on the website. That's cool. We have been working on this for quite a while, since this was a student project back in 2013. So, and since we cannot work this on full time, this is probably the biggest issue. That we have full-time jobs in other places. We can only do this in the free time, in the weekends after work. So this is the reason it took like 5 years for now. But we think right now it's in a pretty good state. We want to add more content, like more levels, and also do this little last polishing tweaks. So if we have done this, and we are planning to have this by December this year, we want to do some playtesting sessions to have more feedback if everything is working together and if people are having fun with it. So at the beginning of next year, we don't have an exact date yet, but the beginning of next year we want to have it in the stores.
Any other questions? Games Farm guys? Oh. Do you have any plans for a sandbox mode included in the game?
Oh. No, not right now, I have to say. It's something we also had in mind, which would be really cool, because the community could do some really cool stuff with it, maybe even stuff that we didn't think about. It's usually a cool thing, but we just don't have the time for it right now. It's one of those crazy big ideas that I showed you in the beginning that we cannot put into reality right now.
For communication and collaboration, which tools are you using together?
So for the project management, we are using Handsoft right now, and for the task management. So there we set up all our tasks. Like for me, that would be, okay, I have this rocket in the game, and if it flies away, I have to create a sound effect that will sound like a rocket flying away. So we have there all our tasks aligned, and that basically looks like you can split it in departments. So there will be sound department, art department, and you can quickly sort it and see what everyone is working on. For communication, we started out with Slack, but since Slack doesn't have voice support, we switched for voice to Discord. Which is a bit tricky right now because we have to switch between those two. And then if you write down something important in the meeting in Discord, but the next day you are working on Skype or on Slack, then you cannot find it again, and then you have to, which program did I use? Where's my history? So that's a bit of a tiny issue. I would recommend you to take only one communication tool you work with. So yes, Slack and Discord. Sometimes, I think in the very beginning, as students, we had just Skype because we didn't know about those two, the other two back then. Let me think if I think that's it so far. So we don't, we also had before Handsoft, we had online documentation on Google Drive documents, I think. So that's how we sync the stuff there. But then we switched to Handsoft, which is a bit more convenient for us.
And any Git or control version or No.
Oh yeah, SVN. I forgot. We use
Okay.
SVN. So Tortoise.
Thank you.
And there we have the project and also assets and sounds. So for example, if our lead artist is making, sometimes she's making videos for YouTube, so she can look into the sound folder and take a tune out of it and put it on the bottom of the video so that there will be some music to the video. And she doesn't have to ask me and do this communication, so we can switch this step, skip this step.
Any other questions? Well, if not, so thank you for a talk. And vám ďakujem za účasť a vidíme sa o 15 minút na prednáške Míša Ivana.
Thank you.